Chris, I'm just going to ask the question that everybody's asking. How much is this a Texas needs to win the Big 12 championship or bust season for them?
Yeah, if Steve Sarkisian doesn't win, or at least go to the Big 12 title game this year, he's not it. That's just plain and simple. Texas returns 10 of 11 starters on offense. Texas returns key pieces all over the defense. Texas has had back-to-back top 5 classes. Texas is going up against a diluted Big 12 this year. 4 new teams that, as we said, have an adjustment process coming in. A TCU team that's going to be worse. A Baylor team that probably isn't to the level it was 2 years ago when it won the Big 12. A K-State team that might take a step back. Oklahoma State's definitely going to take a step back. The stage is set for Texas to win a Big 12 title for the first time in forever. And if it doesn't happen with all the talent on this roster, it is a major, major failure for the Longhorns. Everything sets up for Texas this year. It's up to them to figure out a way to win the Big 12 championship.
Homer, when is the last time Texas won the Big 12 championship? Ooh. Like we're calling now saying that if Steve Sarkisian doesn't win the Big 12 this year, that he's not the guy for the job. That you acting like the Texas Longhorns are just stupid loaded at every position, and they're supposed to come out here and load everybody.
They are.
They are.
What's loaded? I watched Xavier Worthy drop 4 passes in a bowl game. So, I mean, I don't understand what we're talking about here. I didn't see Quinn Ewers looking like he was going to be up for the Heisman. Like, I'm seeing a lot of hype.
Well, here comes Arch Manning.
But I haven't seen any production on the field for you to come away and say that Texas is supposed to be able to win the Big 12. I think that we're giving a lot of credit and we're putting a lot of expectations based on what's on paper. But we haven't seen anything on the grass that makes Texas a major factor in winning the Big 12 this year. We got a whole lot of.
Did you watch the game?
Steve
Did you watch the Alabama game this year in Austin?
But yeah. Man, this is a wild. That's a wild take, Chris Homer, on that. That's a wild take. And I can tell you this: everybody's fighting, saying that Texas and Oklahoma want to go to the SEC early. They better enjoy staying in the Big 12 as long as they can, based on what I saw on the football field this season.
Texas football has a
there's
problem.
No question. The Big 12 creates an easier path to get to the college football playoff for Texas and Oklahoma than the crowded SEC, which is why this year is so critical for Texas and Oklahoma to a degree as well. Like, if you're not winning before you leave for the SEC, you're going to a much more crowded market in a year or two when Texas arrives in the SEC and has to go up against Alabama and Georgia and Florida and A&M and Auburn and all of those great programs, LSU, Ole Miss, all of those great programs in the SEC. It's imperative that you win now while you have the opportunity to. And I know everyone seems to think recently that 2025 is the date for Texas. Texas has 2 years, but that still might not be the case, to be frank. There's a lot of negotiations still going on around the SEC situation. And if you're Texas with the roster it has, you should be a college football playoff contender this year. There's no question about it if you look at the talent. If you look at the way those games went last year too, Texas might have finished 8-5, but in the regular season, all of those losses were by a possession or less. They blew the Texas Tech game. You blew the Alabama game. You shouldn't have lost against Oklahoma State based on the way that game went. There is a world in which Texas finished much better than it did a year ago. That's fine in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian, but with the talent coming back, those results need to and should flip going into year 3. And I really don't think there's any excuses. And saying Texas shouldn't win the Big 12 this year based on previous results, I feel like it's just creating a pile of excuses for a program that should have very few based on the resources it has compared to the rest of the league.
Man, Chris out there dropping knowledge. He's dropping hammers on you, Carl. And makes some good points, man. I think he's right. If Sark doesn't win it this year, it's going to be too much of an indictment in what the expectation level is there in Austin for him to be able to keep his job. They have to get it right before they go to the SEC. And from what we saw last year, it ain't going to happen. Those losses, those one-score losses are really the biggest negative when you think about Sarkisian as the head coach. Can he get over that hump? That's going to be imperative this year. But I'll say this too. Texas has a culture problem. When you throw money at things, when you expect to be, the brightest bell at the ball and things don't fall, everybody starts chirping. They've had a culture problem there, not in the locker room, but with too many voices trying to control. and the efforts haven't been unified and focused. So part of the headwinds that Sark and every head coach that goes to Austin has to deal with is the voice. Now we have NIL and the collectives, and navigating that of all places is extremely difficult there for the Longhorns. So he's got that going against him. The talent is there. He's recruited extremely well. Kyle Flood, the offensive line coach, has a deep and rich room up front. They've got an opportunity to be that, but they've got to prove that on the field. But my belief is Texas has to be able to support their coach by getting out of his way and letting him do things the way that he needs to. And to Chris's point, if Sark don't get that right this year, unfortunately, I know him, I like him, but I might be talking next to him because he might be on CBS with us if he doesn't find out a way to get it done this year, because the expectations in Austin are just that.
Chris Hummer, I heard you talk about money and resources, but we're not about to play Monopoly. I heard you talk about rankings and what's on paper, but we ain't writing the essay. But what I haven't heard you tell me is when have they played good football that makes them the favorite in your mind that it's Big 12 or bust. Now, I admit that the expectations are for Sark to win this, especially going to the SEC, but I just don't think those expectations are realistic. I think Texas is no way they're going to be in the national championship playoff conversation in the 14 playoff, because I think we're still at 4 in this situation. I think the University of Texas will be out of the playoff race by the time it's time for me to dress my kids up for Halloween.
Carl, Texas is never out of the playoff race. People were trying to put them in the playoff this year after 2 losses in like 6 weeks, man. Like, Texas is always going to be part of the conversation. And I think if you look at some of the results from last year, I'm not going to pretend like Texas didn't blow leads and Texas didn't shoot itself in the foot like it has time and time again for a decade. I can't speak to what it is. I think a culture problem, as Aaron said, is likely the foundation of it. This team has not figured out a way to finish in a long time. But in between all of that, you had flashes. This defense for Texas went from being one of the worst units in the Power 5 to a top 30 unit a year ago in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian and Pete Kuzkowski. The offense, while people were unhappy with Quinn Ewers, saw the receivers drop 10% of Quinn Ewers' passes. It wasn't always Quinn Ewers' fault in these situations. Texas is bringing in A.D. Mitchell from Georgia as a transfer receiver. Texas is bringing in Isaiah Nair from Wyoming, who was supposed to be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 for Texas this year before he got hurt in the preseason. So Xavier Worthy might just be wide receiver 3 for Texas going into next year. That's how loaded this offense is. Cedric Baxter, the #1 back in America, coming in to take over from Bijan Robinson. Depth on both sides of the football, offensively and defensively. I'm not saying that Texas is going to win a national championship or Texas is going to make the college football playoff. I'm saying the expectation for Texas has to be at least making the Big 12 championship game, because if that doesn't happen, it's a failure based on everything on the roster and based on everything Texas has pushed to this point. Like, this is the year for Steve Sarkisian, and it's an opportunity with the Big 12 schedule the way it sets up.
Chris, Texas has not won the Big 12 since 2009. In 2009, I had an afro and I didn't have any gray hair. That's the last time and gas was like $1.89 a gallon. That's the last time Texas has won the Big 12 title. Expectations, I expect for my son to take the trash out, but I know when I walk upstairs, it's still sitting in the kitchen. All right? It's not going to happen. I don't see it. Maybe the expectations at Texas are way unrealistic.
Maybe.
Man, you just said a whole lot, but I don't see it, brother, but we will see. We're going to have to revisit this around Halloween time.
Man, I would love to see that afro. And you bringing up Halloween, you got me thinking about them Reese's and them Snickers. But I'll say this, man, it's like you mentioned 2009, the last time they won. It's almost like Texas's fan base is the former prom queen or king that comes back to the reunion and is now like 45 years old, divorced, got a big gut, and still trying to strut around like it's all about something. The times have changed. Colt McCoy was a long time ago. Vince Young was a long time ago. This game has changed mightily, and I think Texas culturally needs to get its expectations back in line with the production that it's had on the field. Yes, Sark is responsible for that. The currency of head coaches in our sport is wins and losses, and he's lost some tough ones that he arguably should have won. And Texas, in my opinion, has often been its own worst enemy. Until that gets solved, I don't know if you can get anybody in there that's going to have the success that's going to satisfy that fan base.
All right,
I just want to say one. I'm sorry. I know this is running long. I want to say one quick thing about expectations. It's fair to say that Texas fans often have outsized expectations for what needs to happen on the field. It'd be one thing if we said Steve Sarkisian in year 1 needs to win the Big 12. That didn't happen. It'd be another thing if we said Steve Sarkisian needs to win the Big 12 in year 2. We didn't really see a lot of fans doing that. The idea is in year 3, with the talent on the roster, a top 5 roster according to the 24/7 Sports team talent composite. This is not Nebraska where you're struggling to recruit in a way where you can compete in the Big Ten and you're hanging your hat on the days of yesteryear and hoping that you're going to come back to national contention. This is Texas, a place that is still recruiting at a level where the results should eventually translate. And if you're the coach that's not having those results translate, I think that speaks more to you and your ability to get the most out of your players than it does fans' expectations. I feel like expectations are a necessary part of any competitive environment. Anybody in any job has expectations, and those shift over time. Winning a championship wasn't Steve Sarkisian's expectation this year. Going into next year in the Big 12, as open as it is, I think it's a very fair thing to expect and ask if you're the Texas fan base.